What happens when a man who has everything believes in nothing? Luca Adewale built walls so high, even emotions couldn't climb them. To him, love was a lie, and every woman came with a price tag. But fate had other plans. One rainy encounter, one unexpected girl, one bold decision by a determined mother. Now, Helen has stepped into a world she never imagined, where luxury is normal, pride is dangerous, and one wrong move could send her right back out the door. But Helen is not like the others. She's not here for money. She's not here to impress. She's here to do the impossible, teach a broken billionaire how to love again. Will she succeed? Or will Luca's cold heart push her away before she even begins? Get ready for drama, laughter, tension, and a love story that refuses to follow the rules. If you love powerful, emotional, and inspiring stories like this, don't forget to like and subscribe for more. The ride to the Adewale mansion felt longer than it actually was. Helen sat in the back seat of the sleek black SUV, her hands folded tightly on her lap, eyes moving from one side of the window to the other. Everything outside looked normal: traffic, hawkers, people shouting prices. But inside the car, her life had just taken a sharp turn. She glanced at Mrs. Adewale, who sat comfortably beside her, scrolling through her phone like this was just another regular day. "Ma," Helen said slowly. "Yes, my dear? Let me ask you one last time. You are serious about this thing?" Mrs. Adewale didn't even look up. "Very serious," Helen exhaled. "So you're telling me I'm going to your house now, to meet your billionaire son, and possibly become his wife?" "Correct," Helen blinked. "Just like that?" Mrs. Adewale finally turned to her. "My dear, life does not always send invitation cards." Helen let out a nervous laugh. "This life you're talking about, Anne, it didn't warn me at all." Pep talk before the storm. A few minutes later, the car slowed down as they approached a massive gate. Security men stood alert, recognizing the vehicle immediately. The gate opened smoothly. Helen's eyes widened. The compound alone looked like a small estate. Clean lawns, fountains, luxury cars parked like they were having a meeting of their own. Helen leaned closer to the window. "Ma, are you sure this is not a hotel?" Mrs. Adewale smiled. "It's home," Helen whispered under her breath. "God, please behave yourself inside this compound." Mrs. Adewale heard her and laughed. "Relax, just be yourself." Helen turned quickly. "Ma, being myself in this kind of place is risky, oh." "How?" "I might touch something and it will be worth my entire village." They both laughed. But as the car stopped, Helen's laughter faded slightly. Reality hit. "This is it," she murmured. Mrs. Adewale placed a reassuring hand on hers. "You're not here to impress anyone." Helen nodded slowly. "I'm here to teach Billionaire how to love," she said, almost like she was convincing herself. "Exactly. First steps into another world." The door opened. Helen stepped out. Immediately cool air brushed her face, mixed with the scent of expensive flowers. She looked up at the mansion. Glass, marble, balconies. It wasn't just a house. It was a statement. "Jesus," she whispered, "even my future is intimidated." Mrs. Adewale chuckled. "Come inside." The interior was even more breathtaking. A grand chandelier hung like a crown from the ceiling. The staircase curved elegantly, like it was designed for slow-motion movie scenes. Everything shone. Everything spoke wealth. Helen walked carefully, almost like the floor might reject her. Her slippers made soft sounds against the marble. "Ma," she whispered, "if I mistakenly break anything here, just know I will start running." Mrs. Adewale laughed. "No need. We'll just add it to your bride price." Helen gasped dramatically. Ah, the calm before the chaos. They settled in the living room. Helen perched at the edge of the sofa, her back straight, her eyes scanning everything. "This chair alone can pay my rent for 5 years," she muttered. Mrs. Adewale smiled knowingly. "Relax." Just then, a deep voice echoed from upstairs. "Mom, I'm back." Helen froze. Her heart skipped. "That's him?" she whispered quickly. "Yes." "Already?" Helen panicked softly. "I've not even arranged my face." Footsteps followed. confident, unhurried. Then, Lucas' voice again. "Who's in my house?" Helen swallowed. "This is happening." Mrs. Adewale leaned back calmly. Very much. A slight delay, and comic relief. Suddenly, Lucas' footsteps stopped. "Hold on," he shouted. "I'm coming." A pause. Then, "After I finish bathing." Helen blinked, then turned slowly to Mrs. Adewale. "Ma?" "Yes?" "Your son just announced his bathing schedule to strangers." Mrs. Adewale covered her mouth, laughing. "He has no filter." Helen shook her head. "This assignment has already started with stress." Helen versus reality. Minutes passed. Helen stood up suddenly. "I need to check myself." She rushed to a nearby mirror, adjusted her hair, smoothed her dress, practiced a smile. "Good afternoon, sir." "No, that's too formal." "Hello, Luca." "Ah, too bold." "Hi." "Ah, that one sounds like I came for interview." She groaned. "This man will not stress me today." From the sofa, Mrs. Adewale watched, amused. "Just be natural." Helen turned. "Ma, natural people don't usually marry billionaires." The moment before impact. Footsteps returned. This time, closer. Helen's heart began to race. Okay, she whispered. "You can do this." She stood properly now, took a deep breath. "Confidence," she told herself. "You are here on a mission." The footsteps reached the stairs. Helen looked up, and in that moment, everything changed, because in a few seconds, she would come face to face with the man who believed love didn't exist, and she was about to challenge everything he thought he knew. The air shifted the moment Luca appeared. Standing at the top of the grand staircase, he looked every inch the man people feared, admired, and talked about. Tall, composed, effortlessly intimidating. His hair was still slightly wet, a few drops of water tracing down his neck. He wore a simple black robe, loosely tied, like he didn't care who was watching. But he noticed her, immediately. Helen. And for a brief second, just a second, something unreadable flickered across his face. Helen's heart pounded. Ah, so this is the billionaire. She straightened her posture quickly, forcing confidence into her bones. "Good afternoon, sir," she said, then quickly added, "and sorry for catching you mid-bath." Luca raised one eyebrow. "You're apologizing for my bath?" Helen froze. "No, I mean yes, no. What I meant is," Mrs. Adewale burst out laughing. "Relax, my dear. This boy likes confusing people." Helen exhaled. "Thank you, Ma, because I was already planning my escape." Luca started descending the stairs slowly, his eyes never leaving Helen. Each step felt deliberate, measured, like he was studying her, evaluating, judging. When he finally reached the last step, he stopped. Close enough now, too close. Helen could feel his presence, strong, intense. He looked at her from head to toe, not in admiration, in suspicion. "Who are you?" he asked plainly. Helen opened her mouth, but Mrs. Adewale beat her to it. "Your future wife." Silence. Complete silence. Even the air conditioner seemed to pause. Luca blinked once, twice, then turned slowly to his mother. "Come again?" Helen raised her hand slightly. "Actually, I would also like clarification on that part." The explosion. Luca let out a short, disbelieving laugh. No, this is one of your jokes." "It's not," Mrs. Adewale replied calmly. He turned back to Helen. "So, what's the deal? You lost a bet? Or you're here for audition?" Helen's eyes narrowed instantly. "Excuse me? How much did she promise you?" Luca continued, walking toward the bar. "Car, house, monthly allowance?" Stepped forward. "First of all, nobody bought me." Luca poured himself a drink. "Everybody has a price." Helen folded her arms. "Then yours must be very cheap." Mrs. Adewale gasped. Luca paused mid-sip. Slowly, he turned. "What did you just say?" Helen held her ground. "I said, if you think everyone can be bought, then maybe it's because you've made yourself cheap enough to believe that." Tension. Sharp. Electric. Then Mrs. Adewale burst out laughing again. "This girl," she said, clapping, "I like her already. Clash of worlds. Luca walked closer again, this time slower, more curious, more alert. No woman had ever spoken to him like that. Not in his house, not to his face. "You're bold," he said quietly. Helen shrugged. "I'm honest. That can be dangerous." "So can arrogance," she replied instantly. Mrs. Adewale almost fell off the sofa laughing. "Luca, today you've met your match." Luca ignored her. His eyes were still fixed on Helen. "Let me make this simple," he said. "Whatever game my mother is playing, I'm not interested." Helen nodded. "Good, because I'm not here for your interest." That caught him. "Then why are you here?" he asked. Helen took a small breath, then said calmly, "To remind you that not everyone is fake." Luca scoffed. "Too late for that." Helen tilted her head slightly. "Or maybe you're just scared to find out you're wrong." The shift, something changed, subtle but real. Luca didn't respond immediately. Instead, he studied her again. This time, differently. Not just suspicion, curiosity, annoyance, and something else he couldn't quite name. "You talk too much," he finally said. Helen smiled. "And you feel too little." Mrs. Adewale clapped again. "I should bring popcorn next time." A deal without agreement. Luca turned to his mother. "This is not happening." "It is," she replied simply. "I'm not marrying her." "I didn't say today," she said. "But she's staying." Luca blinked. "She's what?" "Staying." Helen raised her hand again. "Wait, I would like to confirm. Am I aware of this plan?" "Yes," Mrs. Adewale said sweetly. Helen sighed. "Okay, just checking." Luca shook his head, pacing slightly. "This is unbelievable." He turned back to Helen. "You think you can survive here?" Helen looked around the massive mansion, then back at him. "I survived Lagos traffic and landlord. I think I'll be fine." Mrs. Adewale laughed loudly. "That's my daughter-in-law." The beginning of war, or love. Luca stared at Helen for a long moment, then shook his head slightly. "This won't last." Helen smiled calmly. "We'll see." He took a sip of his drink. "You'll leave," she shrugged. "Only if I want to." Another pause, another silent challenge. Then Luca smirked faintly. Not warm, not friendly, but real. "For your sake," he said, "I hope you know what you've walked into." Helen stepped closer, just enough to match his energy. "I do," she said softly, then added, "I walked into your life." And just like that, the battle lines were drawn. Not with anger, but with something far more dangerous. From the very first day, it was clear. Luca and Helen were not going to be peaceful. They were going to be interesting. Day 1. Territory wars. Helen woke up early. Old habits. By 6 a.m. she was already in the kitchen, tying an apron around her waist like she owned the place. The kitchen itself? A dream. Shiny cabinets, smart appliances, everything arranged like a showroom. Helen turned slowly, taking it all in. "Even this kitchen is richer than me," she whispered. She opened the fridge. Full. Packed with things she couldn't even pronounce. "Ah, what is this one? Organic almonds something something. A bag. Where is bread?" She eventually found what she needed. And soon the aroma of fried eggs, toasted bread, and peppered stew filled the air. Luca walked in minutes later, dressed in a crisp white shirt, phone in hand, already typing emails. He stopped, sniffed the air, then frowned. "What is that smell?" Helen turned casually. "Good morning to you too." He looked at her. "What are you doing in my kitchen?" Helen placed a plate on the counter. "Cooking." "I can see that. Why?" "Because human beings eat food," she replied calmly. Luca stared at her. "You're not a chef." "And you're not hungry?" she shot back. He stepped closer. "I don't eat random food." Helen raised an eyebrow. "Relax. I didn't poison it. You're not that important." A beat. Then, Mrs. Adewale's voice echoed from behind. "Serve me first." Unexpected taste. Mrs. Adewale walked in, smiling like a proud sponsor. "Ah, food is ready." Helen handed her a plate. "Careful, it's hot." She took a bite, paused, then her eyes widened. "This is delicious." Helen grinned. "Thank you, Ma." Luca watched them silently, suspicious. Mrs. Adewale turned to him. Come and eat. I'm not interested. Helen shrugged. Your loss. She sat down and started eating, calm, unbothered, enjoying her meal like she was in her own house. Luca hesitated. Then slowly, he sat down. Just to confirm, he muttered, if I die, I will haunt both of you. Helen didn't look up. Eat first, die later. Mrs. Adewale laughed so hard she almost choked. The first crack. Luca took a bite, paused, then another. He frowned slightly. This is not bad. Helen looked up immediately. Not bad? That's the highest compliment you'll get from me, he replied. Helen smirked. Don't worry, I'll upgrade you. Clash of attitudes. Later that day, Helen explored the house, admiring, observing, touching things carefully like they might bite her. Then she entered the living room where Luca was seated, working on his laptop. Silence. She walked past him. He didn't look up. She came back. Still nothing. Finally, do you always behave like generator without fuel? She asked. Luca looked up slowly. What does that even mean? You're just there, making noise but no light. Mrs. Adewale, watching from a distance, covered her mouth to hide laughter. Luca closed his laptop gently. You talk too much. And you don't talk enough. Balance it. You're very comfortable here. Helen nodded. Yes. Why? She shrugged. Because I'm not pretending. That answer lingered. The breaking point. In the evening, Luca was preparing to leave for his usual night outing. Black outfit, expensive watch, confidence activated. Helen saw him heading for the door. You're going out? Yes. To the same place where people like you for your money? He stopped, turned slowly. What did you say? Helen walked closer. You heard me. His expression hardened. You don't know anything about my life. I know enough, she replied. You surround yourself with people who clap when you spend, not when you speak. That's none of your business. It becomes my business when you claim nobody is real. Luca's jaw tightened. You think you're different? Helen met his gaze. I know I am. Silence. Thick. Heavy. Then Luca laughed. Cold. Give it time, he said. You'll show your true colors. Helen smiled slightly. Or maybe I'll show you yours. A moment alone. That night, Luca sat alone in his room. No club, no noise, just silence, and thoughts he didn't want. He replayed everything. Her words, her confidence, her refusal to impress him. It didn't make sense. Why isn't she trying? That question bothered him more than anything. Meanwhile, Helen, in her room, sat on the bed, exhaling deeply. This man is stress, she muttered. Then she smiled slightly. But he's not wicked. She lay back, staring at the ceiling. He's just hurt. Fire meets water. They were opposites. Luca, cold, guarded, untouchable. Helen, warm, fearless, genuine. Every conversation felt like a battle. Every moment, a test. But somewhere beneath the arguments, something was forming. Not love, not yet, but something strong enough to challenge everything Luca believed. And for the first time in years, his heart didn't feel completely empty. It felt disturbed and, strangely, alive. The mansion didn't feel the same anymore. Not since Helen arrived. Before, everything had been quiet, controlled, predictable. Now, there was noise, laughter, arguments that sounded like entertainment, and a certain kind of energy Luca couldn't explain. Day 3. The uncomfortable change. Luca sat in the living room, laptop open, eyes fixed on the screen. But his mind? Not there. From the kitchen came Helen's voice. Ma, don't add too much pepper. Luca might cry today. Mrs. Adewale laughed loudly. Let him cry. Maybe tears will wash his heart. Luca frowned. What is wrong with these people? He tried to focus again. Numbers, emails, business deals. But then Helen walked past him, not stopping, not greeting, not even looking at him, like he didn't exist. Luca's fingers paused over the keyboard. His eyes followed her briefly. Then he looked back at his screen. Good, he told himself. Peace at last. But strangely, it didn't feel like peace. Later that afternoon, Luca stepped out of his room, expecting the usual. Helen talking, Helen arguing, Helen existing loudly. But the house was quiet. Too quiet. He walked into the living room. Empty. Kitchen. Empty. He frowned. Mom? No answer. He checked outside. Nothing. His chest tightened slightly. Where did she go? He caught himself immediately. Why do I care? But he still pulled out his phone, scrolled, paused, then locked it again. I'm not calling her, he muttered. Meanwhile, Helen sat at a small roadside food spot, laughing with the woman selling akara. Madam, your akara is still the best in this Lagos, she said. The woman beamed. God bless you, my daughter. Helen stretched slightly, enjoying the normalcy. No pressure, no billionaires, no attitude, just life. Simple, real. Back at the mansion, Luca paced, annoyed, irritated, confused. Finally the gate opened. He turned quickly, too quickly. Helen walked in, holding a small nylon bag. She stopped when she saw him. Oh, you're home. Luca crossed his arms. Where did you go? Helen blinked. Out. I can see that. She tilted her head. Then why are you asking? His jaw tightened. You left without informing anyone. Helen shrugged. I'm not a prisoner. That's not the point. Then what is the point? She asked calmly. Luca paused. Because honestly, he didn't know. A crack in the wall. He started, then stopped. Helen waited. Nothing, he finished. She studied him for a moment, then said softly, You were worried. Luca scoffed immediately. Don't flatter yourself. Helen smiled slightly. Okay. She walked past him again. But this time, Luca spoke. Did you eat? The question surprised both of them. Helen turned slowly. Did you just ask if I ate? He looked away. I was just being polite. Helen's smile grew. Well, yes, I ate. A small pause. Then she added, But thank you. The shift begins. That evening, something changed. Not loudly, not dramatically, just subtly. They sat in the same room. No arguments, no tension. Just quiet coexistence. Mrs. Adewale watched from a distance, smiling like a proud director. This film is progressing, she whispered to herself. The unexpected moment. Later that night, the lights suddenly went out. Ah, Helen shouted. Nepa has remembered us. Luca sighed. It's just a temporary outage. Helen laughed. Rich people problem. You still have generator. Right on cue, the generator came on. Lights restored. Helen clapped sarcastically. Wow, even darkness fears your house. Luca couldn't help it. He laughed. A real laugh. Short, unexpected. Helen froze. Wait. She stepped closer. Did you just laugh? He cleared his throat quickly. No. You did. I didn't. You laughed, she insisted. Luca shook his head. You're imagining things. Helen grinned widely. Progress. A quiet realization. That night, Luca stood by his window, looking out at the city lights. Something felt different. Lighter. Not completely, but slightly. He thought about her again. Her voice, her stubbornness, her honesty. She wasn't trying to impress him, wasn't trying to gain anything. And that confused him. Because for the first time in years, he couldn't figure someone out. Meanwhile, Helen's thoughts. Helen lay on her bed, smiling faintly. This man, she whispered. Then she turned, hugging her pillow. He's not as strong as he thinks. Her expression softened. He's just protecting himself. The beginning of something real. The walls around Luca didn't fall overnight. They didn't even crack loudly. But piece by piece, moment by moment, Helen was doing something no one else had been able to do. Not by force, not by strategy, but simply by being real. And Luca, he was changing. Slowly, quietly, dangerously. Because the more he tried to resist, the more he felt it. That unfamiliar warmth again. That thing he buried long ago. Love. And this time, it wasn't leaving so easily. When Luca begins to open up. Just when his walls start to crack. Just when Helen finally reaches the part of him no one has touched in years, everything is about to change. A call comes in, a name from the past, a truth Luca thought was buried forever. And suddenly, the pain he tried to forget comes rushing back. Helen notices the shift, the distance, the coldness returning. But this time, it's different. Because now, she has something to lose. "Stay away from me, Helen," Luca says, his voice colder than ever. "You don't understand what you're getting into." But Helen doesn't move. "I'm not afraid of your past," she replies. Luca looks at her, conflicted. "Then you should be." Will Luca's past destroy the future he's just beginning to accept? Will Helen walk away, or fight for a love that's not fully hers yet? And what secret is powerful enough to shake a billionaire to his core? The story is about to take a shocking turn. Don't miss what happens next. Like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more drama, suspense, and unforgettable love stories.